Employee Wellness. If you haven't seen me before, that is where I work, and I love this topic of plant-based or vegetarian diets, and we'll get into a lot more information. But I just want to know who on Zoom, and Tony, you can just tell me like the number, but who in here follows like a vegetarian or plant-based diet? Yeah. Not totally. Okay. You wouldn't consider yourself vegetarian. Okay. You guys have interest though in this topic. Okay. Awesome. We'll talk about that today. There's a lot of differences with plant-based diets. There's obviously anywhere from like vegetarian, where you're still eating eggs, milk, other dairy products, clear to the other end of the spectrum, which is vegan and you don't eat any animal products. So I'll kind of cover all of the different types of vegetarian or plant-based diets that are out there. We'll just go over some health benefits and also show you some recipe websites and some also like resources that you can use if this is something that you want to incorporate more into your lifestyle. So these are just the objectives. This is what I want you to be able to take away from today. So the first one is just being able to recall differences between different vegetarian dietary patterns. Second, you'll be able to identify 5 health benefits of vegetarian or plant-based diets. You will also be able to list 2 nutrients of concern with vegetarian or plant-based diets. And then the last one is you will be able to apply strategies to start eating more plant-based if this is something that is important to you. So there are a ton of trends in plant-based diets. I feel like this is something that's always been around, but I feel like it's being talked about a lot more lately, especially related to the last bullet point, which is just concern for our food systems overall and our sustainability of our food systems, as well as climate change and the ecosystem and just the environment overall. All of the food that we eat impacts sustainability and impacts the world around us. So I feel like with plant-based diets, that's probably a really hot topic right now, is plant-based diets and sustainability. But there are an endless number of celebrities that follow or promote plant-based diets. I just listed a couple of popular books as well. So In Defense of Food, The China Study, How Not to Die. There's also lots of Netflix documentaries on plant-based diets. So those are becoming more and more popular as well. There's lots of plant-based bloggers and websites. If you get on Google and look up plant-based diets, there's so many things that come up, so many websites and different resources. And we'll talk about later, like I said, some reliable resources to make sure with the vegetarian or plant-based diets that you're getting the nutrients that you need. But there's lots of research resources websites out there. Meatless Monday, how many of you have heard of that? 2 of you, 3 of you, okay. So this is also growing, and we'll talk a little bit about this in a different slide, but a lot of big companies like hospitals, schools, university systems, restaurants as well, are kind of hopping on this Meatless Monday trend in order to help society and people that they're serving and be more plant-based and follow a more plant-based diet. And the top health trend for 2012 was flexitarian diets. And so flexitarians are maybe some of you in this room where you feel like you're conscious of your meat intake or any animal products that you're eating, but you still do occasionally enjoy animal proteins or animal products. So you try and eat mostly plant-based when you can, but you still give yourself the room or the flexibility as well to enjoy those animal products and proteins. So flexitarian is probably the least restrictive plant-based type diet that we can follow, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And then, like I said, there's a growing concern for sustainability for our food systems, and plant-based diets really allow us to keep those food systems flourishing and sustainable and help support the environment around us. So Meatless Monday, like I said, is typically done on Mondays, and you try and eat all of Monday being meatless, so breakfast, lunch, and dinner. However, if that is a struggle and you maybe don't have a lot of plant-based food options, but you're wanting to incorporate Meatless Monday, a lot of clients that I've seen or I've worked with have just done like a meatless dinner on Mondays. So just taking animal proteins or animal products out of one meal one day a week can also help to eat more plant-based foods. So like it says, skipping meat just one day per week can benefit your health and also the health of the environment. And there's just a fun little statistic down here. So livestock production, specifically cattle, produces up to 14.5% of what are called greenhouse gas emissions. And I don't know if any of you in this room are familiar with what those are, but greenhouse gases are produced typically by humans, and they trap heat in the surface of the earth. So you hear a lot about this related to like global warming and climate change, but those greenhouse gases just trap that heat, and instead of the heat escaping to space, it just stays within the Earth's surface. So it's just warming up the Earth essentially. So what Meatless Monday is trying to do is reduce that footprint of livestock production by cutting out meat, either totally on Mondays or just one meal per day. So I just have this fun little website I just wanted to show you really fast. This is a national campaign. So it is Meatless Monday. If you want, you can screenshot this, but it's just mondaycampaigns.org. And what I like about it is it does give you a lot of recipes that are meatless. So there's a bunch of different ones. You can see burgers, there's snacks, there's tacos, there's stir fries. A lot of these look kind of weird just by glancing at them, but there are like common like sandwiches, pastas, but there's lots of different ideas here. If you're like, well, I want to incorporate more plant-based options, especially on Mondays. So what can I cook? And there's a lot of like dinner recipes on here because that's the most common meal where people maybe feel like they can swap animal proteins for more plant-based proteins and foods. But this website is really awesome, gives you a lot of great recipes, and then it also has just some resources on what Meatless Monday is. And then it also gives like activity recommendations. If you have kids that want to cook with you or interested in cooking, they have a kids cook Monday of recipes that are kid friendly as well, that your kids can help you prepare. So this is a really great resource. And again, it's mondaycampaigns.org. So if you do want to jump on the Meatless Monday trend, that's a really, really good resource. Okay, so this is just some statistics of that meatless or plant-based eating and what it can do for the climate. So just the first one, if you eat one less burger per week, it's like taking your car off the road for 320 miles or line drying your clothes half of the time. So just cutting out one meatless meal can have a huge impact on the environment. And this isn't the only reason that people choose to follow plant-based or vegetarian diets, but it is a really big one to know that, hey, I'm benefiting not only myself, but I'm also benefiting the environment around me. So there's some other like fun statistics as well. If you skip steak one day a week, it's like taking your car off the road for almost 3 months. So there's a lot of changes that we can make in our diets that help support sustainability and the environment as well. Okay, so definition of plant-based diet. So this is the most basic definition, is one that focuses on plants. So we're wanting most of our foods or all of our foods to be coming from plant-based sources. So like I said, there's lots of different types of vegetarian or plant-based diets. We talked about the flexitarian, so you eat small amounts of animal foods or meats occasionally, but you follow for the most part a plant-based diet. And then as we work our way up, it does get more restrictive. So pescatarians, they don't eat any animal products except for fish and seafood. You can also be a lacto-ovo-vegetarian, which means no animal flesh again, but they do typically eat eggs and dairy. And then vegan is going to be your most restrictive plant-based diet. They do not eat any animal flesh, no eggs, dairy, cheese, anything animal, and also no honey, just because that is coming from bees, which they do consider to be an animal product. But you can fall anywhere on kind of this spectrum. And like I said, a lot of people who do plant-based, I would say, are more of flexitarian. So they try and eat mostly plant-based. There's different benefits to all of them. For me, I pretty much follow a flexitarian diet. I don't think that I could cut out eggs or dairy. I love them. I love yogurt. But it looks different for everyone. But feel free to still incorporate all of your favorite animal proteins. We're not in any way saying that they're bad for health for you, but we do have a lot of health benefits that come from plant-based eating, and we'll talk about those a little bit later. But this is kind of the spectrum, and you can see where you fall on that spectrum. Any questions on types of plant-based diets or anything we've covered so far? Okay, so I just wanted to throw this image in here. This is the Mediterranean diet pyramid. So I just wanted to throw this in. The Mediterranean diet is more of that flexitarian dietary pattern. So if you're wondering what that looks like, this is a good way to describe it. You're eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, a lot of like whole grains, beans, nuts, legumes. We'll talk about what those are. And then you're really just supplementing the bottom of that pyramid with all of your animal products. So you're mainly choosing like fish and seafood, as well as poultry, eggs, cheese, and yogurt weekly. And then you're consuming like your red meats, like your beef and your pork, maybe like once a week, but you're really using those very sparingly. And this is a good way to just put into context what that flexitarian diet pattern looks like. We're really just consuming meat at most a couple times per week. But this is a great way to incorporate a lot of plant-based foods. So just really working with that bottom of the food pyramid is what we're going to be focusing on. But this is a great way, if you still love meat and enjoy that, to just incorporate that as well as eat a little bit more plant-based. So with diet and just traditional diets of like our ancestors, I feel like this gets brought up a lot when we talk about like vegetarian or plant-based diets. So these are kind of some key characteristics of how our ancestors used to eat. So when we look at their diets, they consumed a lot of whole grains. They also consumed a lot of legumes. So who can tell me what that is or what they think it is? Beans? Yep, that's one of them. No. Lentils? Yep, there's one more. So it's peas. So it's going to be beans, peas, and lentils. So those are what legumes are considered. Have any of you, beans are pretty common. I would assume we've all had beans in here, probably peas as well. Have any of you had lentils? Yeah, do you like lentils? Yeah. So this is just a picture over on the right of a lentil plant. So these seeds actually grow on this plant and then they dry them, and that is what makes a lentil. So it's just little seeds is the easiest way to describe it. So that is lentils and legumes, but incorporating lots of beans and peas as well. They also ate seasonally cultivated like fruits and vegetables and whatever was in their area as well. So they didn't have the abundance of fruits and vegetables that they have today. We couldn't just get them shipped to wherever they were living a long time ago. So they had to use the fruits and vegetables that were available to them. They also had a lot of seeds and nuts. They really overall ate a minimally processed diet just because they are foraging and scavenging a lot of these foods that they're eating from the environment, and they are mostly plant-based. And then they really did have a low use of animal foods. And primarily, if they were eating animal foods, it was usually fish or any wild game that they were catching. So that can look different, obviously, in the different areas of the world. But with plant-based dieting, we don't have to take it to this level, but we just want to be mindful of kind of the way that our ancestors ate, because they had really low disease risk. They didn't have all of the diseases that we're seeing pop up today, specifically like heart disease, diabetes, all of those chronic health conditions. We didn't really see a ton of that with this more traditional way of eating. So this is kind of with plant-based diets, what we're trying to get back to is just living off plants, maybe more living off the earth, and trying not to use as many animal products where we can, which can just help promote health overall. So this is just a statement from the dietary guidelines, which is put out by the USDA. But this just says vegetarian style eating patterns have been associated with improved health outcomes, including lower levels of obesity, a reduced risk of cardiovascular disease, lower blood pressure, and lower total mortality, which is death. Just another quote or position on vegetarian diets. This is from the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, so the leading nutrition and dietetics board in the United States. And they say that well-planned vegetarian diets are completely helpful and nutritionally adequate for people throughout all stages of life. And they have a number of health advantages, including lower blood cholesterol levels, lower risk of heart disease, lower blood pressure levels, and lower risk of hypertension and type 2 diabetes. In addition, vegetarians tend to have a lower body weight, lower overall cancer rates, lower intakes of saturated fat and cholesterol, which is related to heart disease, and then higher levels of fiber, magnesium, potassium, vitamin C and E, folate, carotenoids, flavonoids, and other phytochemicals. And all of those big fancy words at the bottom, they really just help promote overall health and longevity. Carotenoids, flavonoids, and other phytochemicals are oftentimes found in a lot of our plant-based foods. So that's why those terms are there. You don't need to memorize those, but in short, vegetarian or plant-based diets just provide us with a lot of vitamins and nutrients that our body really needs to support optimal health overall. So that's the goal. We want to be healthy, we want to live long lifestyles, and vegetarian or plant-based diets allow us to do that. So we talked a lot about the health benefits. These are just some additional ones. We talked about weight, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, cancer, with those fancy like phytochemicals, carotenoids. This is more related to oxidative stress and inflammation, to aging. Chronic inflammation or stress in our body is not good. And all of those compounds that I just talked about that are found in plants help us to fight that stress and that inflammation that we find in our bodies. So that's another really big benefit of eating plant-based. And then eating more plants also allows for a healthy gut and immune system, because you're getting all of those vitamins and minerals, and you're also getting all of that fiber, which helps to keep your gut healthy, helps with regular bowel movements and things like that. So it really does also like grow that good gut bacteria that helps to support our gut health as well. And then eating plant-based can also have good benefits for our brains, which we all want to help preserve our brain function as long as possible, and plants allow us to do that. So these are just a couple of studies kind of backing up all of the claims that vegetarian diets provide us with. Vegetarian diets are linked to lower CRP levels, which is just a marker of inflammation in our body. That's how they can kind of measure the amount of inflammation present. So vegetarians do tend to have lower levels of inflammation. They also found a study that linked plant-based diets to 20% lower breast cancer risk in women. That was back in 2011, which I thought was really interesting. They're also finding a lot of benefits with plant-based diets in like colon cancer. So that's another really big benefit. And then high adherence to the Mediterranean diet. So that pyramid that we talked about earlier is linked with a 48% lower risk of Alzheimer's disease. So there's that brain protective benefit. And then just increasing those fiber-rich plant-based diet sources promotes healthy gut microbiota, and that is linked to better immune system and support and overall better digestive health. So just a lot of quotes to back up all the benefits of plant-based diets. And we talked about longevity too, being a health benefit of people who follow plant-based or vegetarian diets. So have any of you heard of blue zones? No. Okay. So these are the blue zones throughout the world. There are 5 of them. 4 of them are in other countries. There is one in the US, so it's in California in Loma Linda. And blue zones are regions of the world where they're finding that people live much longer than the average lifespan. And typically these people live into their hundreds and beyond. So they are really interested in what specifically these regions of the world are doing where they're living so long. So healthy, they really don't see a lot of the chronic health diseases that we just talked about. So they're looking into diet, they're looking into physical activity, they're looking into the environment, lots of different factors as to why these people are living so much longer than the rest of us throughout the world. And so it's unique because we do have one of the blue zones here, but Costa Rica, there's a couple in Europe and then Okinawa, Japan as well. So with blue zones, these are kind of some of the key characteristics that they're finding contribute to the longevity or the longer lifespan for the people living in these regions. So they do have an emphasis on daily physical activity as an unavoidable part of their lifestyle. With other key things that they're finding, just they're working less, they're slowing down, they're enjoying life, they're taking vacations. They're also having healthy social networks. They have lots of friends, family. They have a close social network that they can engage with. They also connect with religion. They prioritize family, but the eat wisely part I think is really cool. And so they're finding that these people eat until they're 80% full, which we won't talk about hunger and fullness today, but they're not eating themselves to the point where they're sick or stuffed. They're just eating to that comfortable fullness. They're also eating more vegetables, less meat, and less processed foods. And then they're also drinking a glass of red wine each day. And there is a compound in red wine that they're specifically finding, it's called resveratrol, that they're finding helps support that brain health. So they're studying that more and more as well. But point number 5 is what we're going to be talking about with plant-based diets. They eat a lot of veggies. They really eat more of the dietary patterns that our ancestors ate, of just eating more plant-based, really living off the land with whatever they're provided, and just really prioritizing those plant-based foods. So can you guys tell me any challenges why you think people might not go plant-based, or why they might have difficulty incorporating more plants? There's some up here, but if you think of any additional ones, or maybe why you yourselves maybe struggle with eating plant-based food options.
It can be expensive.
Expensive, yeah, for sure.
It's hard to cook with quinoa.
Yes, I love quinoa, but I've heard that from multiple people. Like, how do you incorporate with that with dishes? Yeah.
Harder to keep it on hand if you want fresh stuff than just frozen.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, especially with like produce. Time, yeah. Definitely takes a little bit more planning, especially when you're just starting out. And thinking of like, how do I get balance and how do I make sure I'm getting all the things that I need without leaving something out? So there's a lot to juggle with plant-based eating. There is a couple of barriers. So listed up here, just misperceptions such as getting adequate protein and calcium. You can get all of the nutrients that you need on a vegetarian diet. So there's a lot of specifically like athletes out there They eat plant-based, but a big misconception among that community is, well, I need a lot of protein, so I can't eat a vegetarian or plant-based diet because I am an athlete and I need all of the benefits that animal proteins can provide, and plants can't provide me with that. And that is a misperception. You can get everything you need with a well-planned vegetarian diet. Also, more food prep is typically required. So a barrier with time, you do have to put a little more preparation into things. Just lack of, or just general like lack of knowledge of like what plant-based proteins are, or cooking skills specifically with protein. How do you cook tofu? What do you add beans to? What are whole grains? What can I add those to? Like Tony mentioned with quinoa, how do I incorporate that? So just lack of knowledge is a really big one as well. And then also just unfamiliarity with new foods such as tofu, tempeh, and other plant-based meat alternatives, just not knowing how to incorporate those, how to cook those so that they taste good, or just unfamiliarity with what they are. So those are a couple of challenges that I see a lot with plant-based eating. But there are definitely ways that we can develop a more plant-based eating style without necessarily turning to like plant-based alternatives like tofu or any of like the alternative meat proteins out there. We can get a lot of things that we need just from very common plant-based food items. So we talked about legumes, just incorporating any beans. Peas are another easy one to incorporate. Lentils, I feel like, are kind of foreign to a lot of people. So you're like, how do I cook with lentils? So that one can be kind of challenging if you don't know what lentils are or you've never had them before, but those are a great source of protein specifically. We also have our soy foods, including tofu, soy milk. Nuts and nut butters are also great sources of plant-based protein, so adding those as well as seeds and seed butter. So I listed a bunch of seeds here. Those all count as plant-based protein. You can also get protein from whole grains. So quinoa, oatmeal is up here, or oats, brown rice, corn, barley. Those are just some whole grain plant protein options. So we typically wouldn't think that we would get protein from like a more carb-based food, but if they're whole grain, even like your whole wheat bread, you're going to be getting some protein from that as well. So if we can switch to more whole grains, that's a benefit because you are getting a little bit more protein than you traditionally would with compared to your more refined bread products or carbs or starches. And then also vegetables. You can get protein from certain vegetables. That's why peas are up there. They're a legume, so they do give you protein. Who knew that there was protein in spinach and broccoli? No. That one, yeah, surprises a lot of people. But there's actually a cup of broccoli has 6 grams of protein in there. So you can get a good amount of protein from broccoli and spinach as well. So not all vegetables are high in protein, but those are 3 that do give you a good amount of protein. So just things to incorporate. I feel like with plant-based diets, a lot of people just focus on protein and getting enough because we typically think of protein coming from animal products. So when we're talking about plant-based diets, people are like, well, how am I going to get enough protein? And there's lots of different options to get protein. You don't just have to stick with like nuts or beans. There's lots of different options if you don't like any of those foods or you find like that redundancy boring. There's lots of different options that you can incorporate. So this is just a vegetarian food pyramid. So this is from Loma Linda University, which was one of our blue zones. So their goal is to really teach people how to have a balanced plant-based diet to help support health and longevity overall. So if you're like, well, how many servings of whole grains do I need? Or how many servings of nuts and seeds should I be getting? This is a great way to break it down. So this is per day, and this can look different for everyone. You may be like 5 to 12 servings of whole grains a day is a lot, but if you eat 4 to 6 times a day and you eat balanced meals, it's not hard to meet all of these markers, but there is a lot of planning that goes into it. But just keeping in mind, again, we're focusing on whole grains, all of our legumes, and our soy products, fruits and veggies, nuts and seeds. And then you can see like dairy and eggs are used very sparingly up at the top, as well as our sweets. So we're really focusing on a lot of those plant-based foods at the bottom. And then also you can see the bottom, just drinking water, getting sunlight, and daily exercise are also important. Not for plant-based diets, but just for overall health. Who is familiar in here with My Plate? Okay, so when we're looking at My Plate, this is just something to point out, but you're noticing 3/4 of My Plate is from plant-based foods. So your whole grains, your fruits and vegetables. There's just that little quarter of the plate and dairy up at the top that are not plant-based. So even My Plate is promoting more of a plant-based or flexitarian dietary pattern. So just to keep that in mind. And this is typically the format that we want to follow, especially if you are trying to do more like of a vegetarian diet, just using meat, not as like the main focus of your meal, but just to accent flavor or to give yourself a little bit of protein. But typically when we're planning meals, we usually plan around whatever meat we're having. So with My Plate, they're just kind of using protein to just help supplement flavor. But we're really focusing on those plant foods. So like I said, with vegetarian diets, the main concern is adequate protein. Protein helps to keep us full for a longer period of time. It's also helpful if we are physically active to keep our muscles healthy. It's good for our skin. It's good for really everything in our body. We need protein to function, good for our bones, our muscles, all of that. And so plant-based proteins, there is some drawbacks compared to animal protein. So when we're looking at protein, we're looking at complete versus incomplete protein. And with all of our animal products, they are going to be considered complete sources of protein. And that's because they have all 9 essential amino acids that our bodies cannot make. So with those 9, we have to get them from food. And so animal products have all of 9 of those. So we don't really have to eat anything else if we're having chicken or fish or pork or steak, whatever it is. Even eggs are a complete source of protein. A lot of our plant-based proteins are incomplete sources of protein. So they're lacking 1 or more of those essential 9 amino acids. So with plant-based proteins, we really have to be mindful of getting different types of plant-based sources so we're making that complete protein. And this will make sense in the next slide, but we typically have to have 2 plant protein sources paired together to get all of those amino acids. So it does take a little more work, a little more thought. You don't have to memorize like beans have to go with whole grains and then I have 9 essential amino acids. We just want to make sure if we are following a plant-based diet, we're getting 2 or more sources of plant proteins, and that's all you need to know. You don't have to memorize which has which amino acid, but we do need those 2 paired together. And then plant-based proteins are packed with a lot of fiber, like I told you before, phytochemicals, micronutrients. So they have a lot of nutrient value to them. So do meats. They just have different nutritional profiles, but plants are really beneficial overall. And there is a couple of plant proteins that are considered complete. So like Tony said, quinoa is actually a complete protein. So you can get all the amino acids. So if you add quinoa to like a grain bowl or you're substituting it in place of like rice, you don't need to add anything to quinoa. Same with soy products. Those are pretty close to like, if you're doing like soy milk, that's most comparable to like cow's milk. So it has all of those essential amino acids, as well as buckwheat, and then hemp seed and spirulina are also a complete source of animal protein. So just something to keep in mind. We just want to make sure that we're getting that balance and we're not missing out on any of those important amino acids. So these are just some combos. This is just an example of 2 things that you could pair together to get that complete protein. So a grain bowl, these are super popular right now, but pretty much it's just like rice or quinoa or another grain, and you can top it with any vegetables of your choice. So a lot of people will do like Mexican bowls where they have like rice on the bottom, beans as well, and then they'll have like peppers and onions or like tomato, olives, and then they'll do like a dressing on top. You can make Greek grain bowls. There's lots of different varieties, but those are super popular. You can kind of think of them as like a stir fry. As well, you can do a stir fry with like chickpeas and cashews. That's a great way to get those 2 plant-based proteins combined. And then overnight oats, if you're looking for like a breakfast idea, doing whole Greek yogurt and then oatmeal as well is another great way to combine 2 of those plant proteins together so that you're getting a complete protein. You can see kind of the combinations over there. Is there anything else that you guys can think of with things that you would pair together?
Vegetables, some of them with those high protein vegetables.
Yeah, you could do a stir fry. So you could do like broccoli, and you could do like quinoa or brown rice, or you could put some nuts in there. So yeah, you can incorporate those vegetables. Yeah. So those are just a couple of ideas, and we'll go over recipe websites if you're like, how do I bring this all together? I need some more help. We'll go over that in just a little bit. And the rest of the presentation, we'll just be talking about a couple of nutrients of concern that we need to just keep in mind with plant-based diets. If we're not thinking about that balance and pairing things together and just getting a variety of different foods, we can miss out on a lot of these key nutrients that are important for our health. So the biggest one is calcium. And if you are a vegetarian who doesn't do like dairy, so if you're not lacto-ovo or flexitarian, if you're more like vegan, you're missing out on all of the dairy. So you would want to make sure that you are getting a total of 2 servings per day of any calcium fortified foods. So that would be any plant-based milks. So that would be your oat milk, your soy milk, your almond milk, whatever milk you choose to drink. Also, tofu is fortified, and then orange juice is also fortified. There's lots of other products that are fortified here and there. Food manufacturers are good at adding a lot of vitamins and things into their food products because they realize that a lot of people probably don't eat as balanced as they should. So calcium will add up little by little, but these 3 are just an easy way to make sure that you're getting enough calcium because they are pretty well fortified. And so you also, with calcium, you can get that from dark leafy green vegetables. So that would be like your spinach, your kale, any like lettuce product that's like dark leafy green. You just want to make sure that you're getting a variety, again, of these different calcium heavy foods. And then if you are a picky eater and you don't like green leafy vegetables or plant-based milk or any of the options listed above, you may, as a vegetarian, want to consider taking a calcium supplement to meet your daily needs. And this really goes for any of the vegetarian dietary patterns. If you feel like you can't get enough variety, it might be helpful to supplement, just because if we're not eating enough or we're not eating a good variety, we might be missing out on things. So if you feel like you're a picky eater, but being vegetarian or plant-based is important to you, you know, you only stick to a number of certain foods, supplementation might be helpful. But usually if we're getting those 2 servings of calcium per day, we're good from any of the foods listed above. Vitamin D, this is one that is not just a concern for vegetarians or people who eat plant-based. It's really a concern for all of us, especially living in Utah where we're not exposed to the sun for a long time. I used to work at the hospital and we always drew like vitamin D levels when people came in. And I would say like 75% of people were vitamin D deficient. So it's a diet thing, but it's also a sun thing, and we can't control the sun. So all of us could probably eat more vitamin D. But specifically with plant-based diets, if you're not eating dairy, it can be really difficult to meet or get enough vitamin D in your diet. So again, a lot of foods are fortified. Any of your plant-based milks, this says soy milk, but a lot of them are also like almond milk is fortified. A lot of your cereals will also be fortified, and your oatmeal, and again, orange juice, which is usually fortified with calcium and vitamin D. Other vitamin D rich foods that you could incorporate would be mushrooms, egg yolks, tuna, and salmon. So again, if you're not eating any animal flesh or any dairy or eggs, it's going to be a little bit more challenging to get enough vitamin D, but really like leaning on those like mushrooms or any of those like whole grain options that are fortified are a great route to make sure you're getting enough vitamin D. In the summer, when it is sunny, we do want to aim for about 10 minutes of sunlight exposure per day, and that just helps our body to synthesize vitamin D. So we can make it, but generally we also need to get it from food as well, because we're not always exposed to the sun. And like I said, generally we would all probably benefit from eating more vitamin D foods or from a supplement. It is the most common deficiency in the US. And about 35% of adults in the US have a vitamin D deficiency. With supplements, if you choose to go that route, there's a difference. There's vitamin D2 and vitamin D3. Vitamin D2 is plant-based, and vitamin D3 is animal-based. So when you're looking at supplement products and you see vitamin D2 and vitamin D3, that's the only difference. Vitamin D3 has been found to be like better absorbed by the body just because it is animal based. Vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin in our body. So it's best absorbed when there is a fat like bonded with that. So that's why vitamin D3 from an animal based product is usually going to be better absorbed, is because it is fat soluble paired with that animal product. So vitamin D3 is probably the most beneficial. If you can't find it, D2 is still totally fine. Or if you are vegan and don't want any animal products, your only route is going to be vitamin D2. But if you are looking to supplement, vitamin D3 is the best absorbed vitamin D. So just look for that. It will tell you right on the label if it's D2 or D3, but just something to be mindful of. Okay, we have two more, and then we'll talk about websites and other resources. So vitamin B12 is only found in animal foods. So if you are especially vegan, this is a huge nutrient of concern that we want to watch for. But also if you're a vegetarian and limiting a lot of animal foods and dairy, this could be a big concern for you as well. It's usually only in meat, fish, poultry, eggs, and dairy. There are some fortified products such as cereal and soy milk, but typically they're not fortified in the concentration that we need. There's also nutritional yeasts, which are a good option. Some people will cook with those. Some people will also like sprinkle it on top of certain like foods. So I have seen like it sprinkled on top of like oatmeal. It doesn't really have a taste. So if you mix it in something, you can't really tell you're getting nutritional yeast, but it is typically the most fortified food for vitamin B12. And if you are vegan or you're not eating any animal products, you should probably take a vitamin B12 supplement just to make sure that you're getting enough vitamin B12. Okay, the last one is iron, and the body doesn't absorb iron as easily from plant-based sources as it does from animal sources. So the amount of iron that's recommended for vegetarians is actually double what it is for those eating animal-based products, just because that absorption rate is not the same. So we do need a lot more iron-rich foods as vegetarians or those that follow plant-based diets. So you can see all of the different iron-rich foods listed, beans, peas, lentils, any of your legumes. Again, cereals, they can add a lot to cereal. So that's a good product that's usually enriched with a lot of things. Whole grains, the dark leafy green vegetables again, and then dried fruit is also a good source of iron. To help as vegetarians or those who eat plant-based to get a little bit more absorption of that iron, we just want to make sure we're eating an adequate amount of vitamin C as well. And typically pairing those foods together at the same time just to help your body get as much iron as you possibly can from the plant-based sources that you're eating. So there are also a list of vitamin C rich foods below. So a lot of them are fruits and vegetables. Again, you can find a lot of vitamin C fortified, but these are the best sources of vitamin C. So just make sure you're pairing those iron-rich foods with those vitamin C-rich foods. If you're getting whole grains and vegetables paired together and eating kind of that balance of my plate, you don't necessarily need to worry about like memorizing this list and remembering that, but just again, that variety is really important, that we're eating lots of different foods. So we're getting all of the different nutrients that things have to offer. So just something to keep in mind with vegetarian diets is there is a little bit more work, but you can get that balance that you need. Yeah.
Dried beans,
Yeah.
so fresh doesn't have the iron, or what is it about?
So you do lose a little bit of iron like in the cooking process, not a significant amount, but if you cook them, you're still getting iron from them.
So what kind of dried, like dehydrated beans or?
Yeah, it's like the dry beans that you like get at the store.
But you cook them
You
and
cook
then they're,
them, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, you'll lose a little bit, just like I said, from the cooking process, but not a significant amount. So yeah, those like cooked are still a great source of iron. Yeah, the concentration of iron is just going to be super concentrated when it's dry. So yeah, good question. So these are just some tips for if you want to incorporate more plant-based foods into your eating style. So the most common ones, just using meat as a seasoning, not planning our meals around meat, trying to plan it more around plants, and using meat as more of a flavoring instead of the main course. When you're shopping, just try and plan your menu around plants instead of meat. With like fruits and vegetables, kind of the barrier that we talked about is fresh fruits and vegetables can go bad really fast. So canned and frozen options are great if you feel like I want to eat more fruits and vegetables. That's something with plant-based eating style you can see, like with my plate, fruits and vegetables were covering half of the plate. But if you feel like you throw away a lot of fresh produce, you can totally use the frozen and the canned options as well. Just make sure fruit is canned in its own juice, not heavy syrup. And then if you are doing canned vegetables, try and get low sodium options there. But those are great to help with making it so that you're not throwing a lot of food away or it's going bad before you can use it. Also, just trying to like convert your favorite dishes into more plant-based friendly meals. So if you do like tacos, a lot of us will do like ground beef or chicken instead using like beans or cheese. People have also done like lentil tacos, so you could do that as well. But with the favorite dishes that you cook already, just thinking about how can you add a plant-based source of protein to that meal, or what can I add that would help it to be more plant-based. But there's lots of other eating tips on here, and this will kind of be helpful with like recipes that I'll show you. I'll show you a couple of different websites, but the biggest thing is if plant-based eating is something that's important to you, just go vegetarian in phases. Try and slowly add plant-based foods into your diet. rather than just taking that drastic sudden shift towards a vegetarian diet, because it can be really overwhelming and really difficult to go from eating a lot of animal protein and not knowing really how to incorporate plant proteins or cook them to like eating solely plant-based protein. So just go in phases. Meatless Monday is a great way to start, just that one meal a week, and then work your way up from there, and adding in and swapping those plant-based food choices. So don't jump all in. I've had people do that and they're like, this is too hard. I'm overwhelmed. I don't want to do this anymore. So just really start slow with shifting to a more plant-based diet and work your way up from there until you get as plant-based as you want. And again, you can fall anywhere on that spectrum, but just do what works for you. So these are a couple of recipe websites, and I will probably have Tony send this out to all of you who registered, so you don't have to take a picture of all these. You totally can, but I just pulled up a couple of my favorite websites just to show you. This one is Oh My Veggies, and it has everything from like vegetarian or flexitarian to vegan or completely plant-based with no animal products. So you can see there's breakfast recipes, there's stews, sandwiches, popsicles, pizza. There's lots of different options. So you can go to this Find Recipes at the top. You can also click on if you're preparing a main dish or breakfast. There's a holiday section. So really whatever you're looking for, this is a great spot. Also cooking tips if you feel like you need help getting started with cooking these. This is a really great resource. And then this is probably the one that I use the most is I Heart Vegetables. And same thing, it classifies different meals, desserts, side dishes, snacks. There's also like weekly meal plans that you can purchase. This 15-minute recipes is really nice if you're like in a pinch and need something really quick. These are all plant-based options that are 15 minutes or less. But I super love this website. I use it a lot. So this is a really good one. And I feel like a lot of the foods, sometimes when people Google like plant-based recipes, it's a lot of these foods where they're like, I've never eaten that. I've never seen that. How do I cook that? I feel like the things in here are pretty common foods for the most part. So if you're like, I don't know about plant-based diets, some of these websites look weird, go to this one and it's more normal foods, like what we're used to. So this one's really nice. But there are all these other ones that are also great as well. So I'll have Tony send those out as a resource. And then there's also a couple of cookbooks. So if you're someone who loves cookbooks, is interested in any vegetarian or plant-based cookbooks, these are a couple that I recommend that are really good and people have used before and have really great success with. So those are also resources available to you. But I'll just end with any questions that you guys have about plant-based eating, about vegetarian diet,